It's an honor to be in a place where diversity, equity, and inclusion is lived out in real meaningful ways, in ways in which you feel that it's not just words, it's not just meant to be the thing that we have to do for this 5-year period. I believe that DEI is just as important as Maize and Blue.
I'm extremely proud to work for an institution that has DEI front and center. I'm a first-generation scholar. My parents didn't go to college, and so to be a full professor at a leading research university that embraces perspectives of people from all walks of life is extremely meaningful to me.
Now, we all know that you can come to Michigan to learn chemistry, to be the best historian you can be, to master the field of neuroscience. But Michigan is also one of the top places to learn how to dialogue across different groups. That makes me really proud to be a Wolverine.
The DE&I plan implementation was a very intentional, ground-up process, ensuring that while our goals were the same, the interventions could be very tailored to the unique needs of the local environment.
To have this specific plan, to have clear goals is extremely important.
Now we have increased awareness about what diversity, equity, and inclusion is. People have a vocabulary that they can draw upon to communicate about this and express themselves.
Right after the plan started, everything changed. People realized that we needed to look at equity in particular. Architecture, for example, we were doing a really good job in terms of gender diversity. Now we're developing policies and practices for all hires, and we're even going to work on student hiring and how do we need to have rubrics for student hiring. And that has been really, really amazing.
I think what the DEI plan has helped do is help us frame some core objectives that now we have intentional objectives that all of us are working towards.
I think something that my student org tries to do a lot is to have really intentional recruiting so that we do get that diverse student base that we're looking for.
People are much more comfortable talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. People are participating more in discussions about them. So that's a big climate change.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion makes University of Michigan a better place for everyone because it encourages everyone to feel valued and to thrive, to reach their fullest potential. That's what makes Michigan a special place.
Diversity is very important. It helps to expose us to things that I might not have considered as just being from the U.S.
I'm very grateful for the dialogues we can have within our classes, outside of class.
And the university supports those conversations, the faculty supports that, but most importantly, the students are the reason why we're having these conversations in the first place.
DEI helps bring us back to that original mission of higher education where anybody who feels like they can get value from a higher education degree is able to be included and feel like their voice is heard. And I think that's what's most exciting about DEI is that everybody can feel heard and included in the community.
To solve social problems effectively, we not only need to recruit and retain and cultivate an inclusive workforce, but we also need to have all those people at the table to define what the next social problems are going to be.
I have not seen other institutions that function like us. We are leading the way, and we have this incredible opportunity to raise the bar so high that we actually will be able to address inequity.
My hopes for the future of DEI at the University of Michigan is that it will not only permeate our campus, but that it will change and transform our world.
The future of DEI is that we don't have DEI because DEI is the norm.
And that's what I hope to see, to interact with and learn from people who are different from us, and we embrace those opportunities in the classroom and outside the classroom. Isn't that what DEI is all about?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Robert Sellers, and I'm the Vice Provost for Equity and Inclusion and the Chief Diversity Officer here at the University of Michigan. Before we get started, I want to clear one thing up. I know that the photos on the flyers advertising today's events have gone around, and many of you thought it was me. It wasn't, it's actually our speaker, Van Jones. But of course, looking at the photo up close, I can understand why many of you may have been confused by the two of us. In all honesty, there are some mornings I wake up a little weary and I really wonder, am I Van Jones? In all seriousness, I want to welcome all of you here in Hill Auditorium this morning to the 2019 DEI Summit Community Assembly. I also want to welcome those who are watching via live stream at watch parties and at your desks and other spaces all around our campus. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Regent Denise Illich, who is here this morning to join us, and we'd like to thank her for doing so. Our month-long DEI Summit provides an opportunity for us to acknowledge our progress thus far in the 5-year DEI plan implementation, as well as an opportunity for us to recommit ourselves to addressing the challenges that we still face in creating a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive community. Throughout the month of October, there'll be a series of university-level and unit-level events focused on DEI. If you'll look in your programs, you'll find that there's a flyer that provides information about many of these events. I invite you all to attend as many of these events as possible. Your programs also include information about the Year 3 Progress Report. A major strength of our DEI effort is the fact that we hold ourselves accountable for our proposed actions both at the central and unit levels. The Year 3 Progress Report is an instantiation of that accountability. It also represents our efforts to be as transparent as possible, because the responsibility for the plan's development and our progress in implementing the plan belongs to everyone. And as a result, everyone must have access to this report. Thus, I invite you to go to diversity.umich.edu to view the 3-year plan report, as well as to view the newly refreshed action items for Year 4. Now, I have bad news and good news about this year's Community Assembly. In past assemblies, I have stood and provided updates with regards to our progress. I know you missed those PowerPoints. Well, the bad news is that this year I will not be providing that progress report, at least at the Community Assembly. No ah? Ah. On the other hand, the good news is that we will have a whole session devoted on reviewing our progress. That session will be on October 16th at 1 o'clock in the Michigan League Ballroom. It will provide an opportunity for us to examine how far we've actually come in these past 3 years. Oftentimes, when one's in the midst of a very hard task, in a heavy lift, it's difficult to understand, or it's difficult to recognize the progress that we've made. This session will provide a concrete opportunity for us to review that, and an opportunity for you to share your own experiences. Once again, I very much hope that you'll attend this session. Before we get started with the rest of the program, there's one other issue that I'd like to address this morning. DEI is often criticized, and it's often criticized based on the belief that DEI efforts are only about designating resources and attention to benefit some specific, particular people to the exclusion of other people. And those particular people are the individuals who have traditionally been underrepresented or marginalized or considered minorities. I'm here to tell you this morning that when it comes to the University of Michigan DEI plan, they're absolutely right. Our plan focuses on a myriad forms of diversity and commits to provide attention and resources to those who hold identities within these forms of diversity that have traditionally been underrepresented, marginalized, underacknowledged. I would like to, however, try a quick demonstration, so please bear with me for a moment. Will everyone that is here, please close your eyes until I tell you to open them. And those of you who are watching on live screen, you can also close your eyes unless you're doing something where that would be problematic. Everyone's eyes closed? Please keep them closed. If you're able, please raise your hand and keep it raised if you hold one of the identities in any of the following categories that has traditionally been marginalized or underrepresented within those identities. Race and ethnicity. Raise your hands and hold it. Gender. Social class. Ability/disability status. Sexual identity. Sexual orientation. Mental, physical health status. National origin. Citizen status. Generation status, i.e. first, second, third, multi-generation college graduate. Religion. Veteran. Political affiliation. Age. Geography, urban or rural. These are all domains of diversity that have received additional attention and resources in some way through the university's DEI plan. Okay, everyone, please open your eyes and keep your hands up. It looks to me from here that we've touched just about everyone. I'm not sure, my eyes aren't very good. Of course, if your hand is not raised, then one might ask the question as to whether or not you need much extra attention or support. Nonetheless, I submit to you that the DEI is a benefit to all of us, and thus is relevant to all of us. We all hold identities in which we are privileged, as well as identities in which we have traditionally been marginalized or underrepresented. This is not to intimate that all forms of privilege and marginalization are the same, but it does mean that we all have some common experiences that we can all access. In turn, this means that there is also common ground upon which we can build more effective, more respectful, and more productive relationships across our differences. And we must do so in the service of a much greater good. Basically, that's all that the DEI at U of M is about. So now, let's move on with this morning's program. Throughout today's program, we'll view a series of videos showcasing just a small sample of the great work that has been occurring across our campus community addressing various forms of DEI. Our first video showcases the work that Information and Technology Services, or ITS, is doing to address issues of digital accessibility.
Think about the technology we need each day to be leaders and best. Access to that technology is key for the success of each individual in our community. Going Blue means getting access to the resources we need to get a degree, conduct research, perform our duties, or care for our patients. In support of a new university policy, ITS published a set of guiding principles to ensure that people with disabilities enjoy the services we offer to campus. The goal of the new policy is that all Michigan IT is as effective, available, and usable for people who have disabilities as it is for those who do not. So what does that look like in practice? It means we cultivate internal expertise to review the digital accessibility of our own services as well as the ones we buy from third parties. It means we provide assistive technology software to make sure web content can be accessed by people using any device. And it means we provide support to facilitate unhindered access to information resources. Check out our complete guiding principles for accessibility. Help us adhere to them so we can benefit Wolverines everywhere. They are part of the ITS web strategy, but they also represent our ongoing commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So join ITS, go accessible, and go blue.
Now it is my honor to introduce our next speaker. President Schlissel has just completed his first 5-year term as president here at U of M. Upon joining us here, Mark committed his presidency to making the university a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive institution because he understood that that was the only viable strategy to making sure that the University of Michigan is the best university possible. Since arriving, he's not only talked the talk, but he has also walked the walk. He's been a real champion for the cause. In fact, when I talk with my colleagues, fellow CDOs at other institutions, they're often quite envious of the level of support from the top that we have here for DEI. And Mark embodies that support and leadership. It is my great pleasure to welcome to the stage Mark S. Schlissel, the 14th president of the University of Michigan.
Good morning, everybody. It's really great to be here, and thanks, Rob, very much for the introduction and all the work you do here at the university. I also thank everyone in our community who's helped us to reach this point in our work to enhance diversity, equity, and inclusion at the University of Michigan. Our achievements thus far are a direct result of so many members of our community joining together to not only advance our values, but to live them, to share them broadly and instill them in all parts of our mission as a public university. This includes thousands of people, our faculty, staff, and students and supporters, past and present, who care deeply about our university. In that light, I want to give a special shout out to our 275 DEI leads. There's really no other team like this on campus. They're embedded in all of our units, so their connections span the campus. They do much of the implementation work to make the strategic plan successful. They help us ensure accountability, and they allow ideas to bubble up from all levels in this large and complicated university. So thank you, DEI leads, and thank you to everyone who's advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion at the U of M. At the University of Michigan, diversity, equity, and inclusion are values inseparable from our excellence in research, education, and service. DEI is not treated as an ancillary problem to be addressed. It's a deeper commitment to being a better university for all and for the society we serve. As a result, we're not the same university we were when our DEI initiative began. During this summit and in the Year 3 Progress Report, we're sharing many examples of how we've changed. This includes our health plans covering additional medical procedures for transitioning transgender members of our community. All employees are being required now to complete sexual misconduct training, and a spectacular, important, and meaningful Trotter Multicultural Center right on State Street. The work you do and the changes we've made together have been recognized nationally, including a 2019 HEED Award from Insight into Diversity magazine. But one essential component that remains the same is our resolve. We know there's much more work to do before our community is as diverse and welcoming as we want it to be. And we have no shortage of commitment to help us get there. It's energizing and inspiring to see it every day all across our campus. I look forward to joining you as this important work continues beyond the initial 5-year strategic plan. And as I begin the second 5-year term as president of the university, DEI will remain a focus and will continue to throughout my presidency. We're a university that aspires to create knowledge and understanding for the public good, to teach new generations of leaders, and to serve all members of society always. My own engagement with DEI and all of you have given me an ever-increasing appreciation of the importance of our work. During my medical training at Johns Hopkins back in the 1980s, I delivered babies and cared for children and families of different races, ethnicities, cultures, and backgrounds. The joy, the tears, and the profound sense of love and hope exhibited by parents who had created life are some of the most universal human qualities. They do not differ fundamentally across demographics. But sometime after that common joy of new birth, our differences too often become divisive and lead to marginalization and exclusion. We see this sometimes in our attitudes towards one another and in biases revealed in our views and in our behaviors. We see this in economic opportunity and in education, in workplaces, and in justice. And the inequities that result are a challenge here at Michigan and beyond. My work in the years since medical school has further bolstered my belief that innate talent and potential are uniformly distributed in our society. They do not differ fundamentally across demographics. But I've also seen far too many examples that demonstrate that opportunity is not equally distributed. We can only fulfill our promise and our ambitions as a university community by continuing to promote positive change on our campus and by extension in our world. This is why our strategic plan strives to go beyond equality, where everyone's treated equally, and seeks new levels of equity, where everyone is treated in such a way that they can reach their own full potential, where we can be more just and more excellent as a university, and closer to a world where all children will always be empowered to develop and use their own full talents. Thank you again for your dedication to the University of Michigan and to our essential values of diversity, equity, inclusion. Thanks for coming today, and of course, go Blue. It's now my pleasure to introduce Katrina Wade Golden. Dr. Wade Golden is a Michigan alumna, our Deputy Chief Diversity Officer, and Director of Implementation of the DEI Strategic Plan. She is the force and the energy that stands behind all of the good we've accomplished. So please help me welcome Katrina Wade Golden.
Thank you, President Schlissel, for those comments and for your wonderful leadership. And hello, Michigan family. So as you engage today's program, we want to advise you that we want to continue to hear your voice. So just a quick note, as you exit today, there will be comment cards in the atrium if you want to leave comments, and you can also reach us at diversity.umich.edu. So on to the keynote. So I have the wonderful honor today of introducing our keynote speaker, Mr. Van Jones. Now, many words have been used to describe Van Jones: social entrepreneur, human rights advocate, change maker, and truth teller are just a few of those. A 3-time New York Times bestselling author, Van hosts 2 shows on CNN, The Van Jones Show and The Redemption Project. As social entrepreneur, Van's life's mission is to close prison doors and open doors of opportunity. He has been a leader in the fight for criminal justice reform for more than 25 years. To achieve his goal, Van co-founded a series of social enterprises, including Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, colorofchange.org, greenforall.org, Rebuild the Dream, and the Dream Corps. Today, Van is the CEO of the Reform Alliance, an initiative founded by Jay-Z, Meek Mill, and 6 billionaires to transform the criminal justice system. In terms of social impact, in 2018, Van and the hashtag Cut50 led the winning campaign to pass the First Step Act, a bipartisan federal bill that the New York Times called the most substantial breakthrough in criminal justice in a generation. This was not Van's first history-making legislative victory, however. A decade earlier, Van was the primary champion of the Green Jobs Act of 2007. In 2009, he worked as the Green Jobs Advisor to the Obama White House. Van has won numerous awards. Among them was Time's 100 Most Influential People in the World. Born in Jackson, Tennessee, Van lives in New York City and Los Angeles, and he is a proud father of 2 sons. Please join me in giving Van Jones a warm Michigan welcome.
It's good to be here. That was nice. That was a good introduction. It's good for my self-esteem. I thought I got to talk for an hour. I only get about 15 or 20 minutes, so I'm just going to tell a few stories. But the main point is this. I don't care if you're black, white, Latina, Latino, Asian American, Native American. I don't care what faith you are. I don't care what gender, expression, sexuality expression you are. In this new century, the absolute prerequisite superpower for success is how do you deal, how do you perform in a radically diverse environment. That will determine your success or your failure in this new century. You are not going into a century where you are going to be working with people, collaborating with people, inventing with people, innovating with people, problem solving with people who look like you, who are from the same place as you. I lead 2 teams. I have a team I lead right now. I'm not sure any of the people on this team, it's a global team, have ever been in the same room together. I don't think I've ever been in the same room together. It's all digital, it's all networks, it's people all around the world. And I come to this conversation about diversity from a very practical, pragmatic point of view. I spent my 20s in a drug-infested den of iniquity called Yale University. And it was rough, aberrant behaviors. I made it through. But I start with that because we have this false view of reality. I saw more drugs used at Yale University than I ever saw in a housing project, period. I saw, yeah, it's true, you can clap for that, it's true. I saw more aberrant behavior, I saw more rule breaking, I saw more norm breaking, I saw way worse behavior at Yale than I ever saw in a housing project. And yet, when those kids got in trouble at Yale, nobody called the cops. At best, they went to rehab or Europe. And then they come back, next semester, are all straightened up, and they went on to have great lives. And everybody forgot about those 2 semesters where they were acting like total lunatics. But 4 blocks away, in the housing projects in New Haven, Connecticut, poor black kids doing fewer drugs, selling fewer drugs with less money, almost all went to prison in the 90s. And they came back 10 years later, 15 years later, 20 years later, now they're drug felons. And those same Yale students who are now in positions of power won't hire them. Well, I can't hire these people. They're drug felons. Well, what were you doing? I don't mean to scare anybody, but we might have some nonviolent drug offenders in this room. Don't raise your hand. So when we're talking about diversity and standards and all this stuff, let's live in the real world. I've spent a lot of time in various White Houses. I've gotten 4 presidents in a row to do things I thought were important. I got Bill Clinton I was a part of a movement to get Bill Clinton to close an HIV-positive prison camp on Guantanamo in the 90s that George H.W. Bush had set up. Victory under a Democratic president. I got George W. Bush to sign the Green Jobs Act, as was mentioned. Victory under a Republican president. Got Obama to hire me. Victory for my mom and dad. And then I got Trump to sign the First Step Act, which so far has restored 115,000 years of human freedom. 115,000 years of human freedom restored by the First Step Act. How have I been able, so 2 big victories under Republican presidents, 2 successes under Democrats. How have I been able to do that? I've been able to do that because I've learned that cognitive diversity, racial diversity, gender diversity, ideological diversity, viewpoint diversity are strengths and not weaknesses. And I work very, very hard to be good at working across those lines. And what I'm going to tell you is, the myth is that if you want to be a successful person of color, if you want to be a successful woman, if you want to be a successful religious minority, whatever it is, if you want to be successful from that one down position, one down, you've got to get good at diversity. That's true. But increasingly, it's becoming the case that if you're in that one up position, if you're white, if you're male, if you're straight, if you're whatever, for you to be successful, you've also got to get good at managing across difference. And the most important thing a college can do, since you are the future builders, you're the seed planters for tomorrow, is to make sure this campus looks like the world students are going to be going into. To make sure this campus functions like the world students are going to be going into. I'll tell you a story about a guy I miss every day. His name was Prince. Beautiful brother. Beautiful brother. Almost 4 years gone, but I think about him every day. I got a chance to work with him for about 6 years. Everybody thinks about Bill Gates when they think about philanthropists and stuff like that. Prince gave away almost all of his money, and he never told anybody he was doing it. And one of the causes he cared a great deal about was giving young people of color and young people from disadvantaged backgrounds access to Silicon Valley. Never forget one time he said he was mad about iTunes. And I said, Prince, why are you so mad about iTunes? He says, why should Steve Jobs get my money? He can't even play the guitar. And he was making the point that you have all these creative artists, but so much of the money is taken by the technologists and by the managers and the lawyers. All the people who can't play guitar, all the people who can't sing make so much money off the music industry. And he wanted to see young people who are creative be able to get into technology. And we set up something called Yes We Code. Yes We Code. And we've got partnership with Apple and all this sort of stuff. But one of the things I learned doing that, and Yes We Code is still a force in Silicon Valley right now to bring people in. But I learned a story, true story. There were a bunch of engineers trying to solve the next problem in the computer science space, which is what they call wearables. Computers are now getting so small that eventually they'll just be a little button on your lapel or an earring. Like literally, the computers you're carrying around in your hand, that's not going to be happening. You will literally be wearing them. But then the question becomes, how do you plug in a wearable computer? How do you do that? How do you charge it? How do you stick in the plug? This is hard. This is not an easy question. So they got the best engineers at this one major company, and they put them in a room together, and they spent 9 months trying to solve this problem. Of course, they were the best engineers, so of course they were all guys. And they are just vaporizing cash, trying to solve this problem. Female engineer happens to walk through the conference room, not invited and not there intentionally, but walks through and then just stops and observes the conversation. Of course, they don't pay her any attention. And she finally just says, I don't mean to be rude, but you're talking about wearable computers, jewelry-sized computers. Do any of you wear jewelry? No. Well, let me just, not for nothing. Those of us who do wear jewelry, at the end of the day, we take off our jewelry and we put it in a bowl. Have the bowl be the recharger. $1 billion idea. $1 billion idea. And now, this was not the direct company, but a beneficiary of it. If you have Bose or Beats by Dre, how do you charge them? Put them in a little bowl, click, woman. 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 So, what you have to understand as an employer, you're not hiring individuals, you're hiring teams. There is no job I have for an individual. I have a team and multiple teams, and the people who are winning are the people who are great at teams. They're the people who are able to tap all the genius, have really weird people work together well, and they are killing the game. In Silicon Valley right now, the big money people are starting to say, if you do not have a diverse board, we will not invest in you. Because it's turning out that everything we've been saying is true. This is not charity, folks. Oh, we got to do something for these poor, pathetic, people that don't meet our standards and they suck, but geez, we feel bad, let's give them a break. If that's your rationale, stop doing it. You're missing the whole movie. You're not paying attention. Don't do it. We've got to get enough viewpoint diversity, experience diversity, so that we can start getting excellent conversations going. We can't keep having the same stupid arguments over and over again because we're just stuck. You start adding in new viewpoints, you start adding in difference, you start getting excellence at the team level, at the network level, which is what matters. It's a completely different paradigm. And the companies that get that are winning. The ones that aren't are falling further and further behind. The campuses, they're going to have alumni that can write big checks in 20 years, are the ones that get it right now. The ones that get it right now, those are going to be the ones. And so I'll tell you another story about ideological diversity. I had a TV show with a guy named Newt Gingrich. It was called Crossfire, because we don't agree on anything. And so we were literally paid to get on TV and argue with each other about stuff. Interesting job. And so we got to the question of criminal justice reform. And we started talking about it, and he said, Van, why are you so soft on this question of shrinking the prison population and dealing with reforming our justice system? Why are you so soft and why are you so weak? I said, what do you mean I'm soft? I graduated from Yale Law School in 1993. I moved to the Bay Area. I started suing police departments and prisons. I helped to close 5 abusive youth prisons in California, which I'm very proud of. I helped to reform 2 out-of-control police departments. I got a police officer fired, which is very hard to do. I said, I've been doing this for years. It's a key issue for the African-American community. As I said, I saw that the war on drugs wasn't a war on everybody on drugs. It was a war on a certain group. And he goes, yeah, I know all that. And that's important. The racial justice thing's important to you. But what about us conservatives? He said, Van, you don't understand. I voted for some of this stuff. But what happened is we wound up building a big, failing government bureaucracy, this incarceration industry, that gobbles up money and produces bad outcomes with no accountability. That's not conservative. We're not in favor of big, failed government bureaucracies that eat up money and give bad outcomes. He says, I have libertarians in my party who are very concerned about this thing gobbling up so many individual liberties and having more and more surveillance, and more power over people's lives. That's not conservative. That doesn't respect individual liberty, individual dignity. He says, also, I'm a Christian conservative. Where's the redemption? Where's the second chances? People leave a physical prison and they go into a social prison as quote unquote ex-felons. Can't rent an apartment. Who's going to rent to you? Can't get a job. Who's going to hire you? By law, you can't get a student loan. So every sentence is a life sentence. Where's the proportionality? Where's the redemption? Where's the second chances? He goes, as a conservative, I can't support this. And I said, where you been all my life, Say more. And he said, well, Van, I'm not the only person that feels this way. Rick Perry in Texas, governor, set into motion a process that closed 8 prisons in Texas and brought the crime rate down. He says, my friend, the governor of Georgia, Governor Deal, has been passing criminal justice bills in a red legislature and has brought the crime rate down and the incarceration rate down. Governor Bryant in Mississippi, he says, we've been working on this. Our language is different. But frankly, we have as many successes as your blue state governors. And at that point, Jerry Brown was governor of California, and he was in federal court resisting a federal court order to reduce overcrowding in our prisons in California while they're closing prisons in Texas. I said, I didn't know. I didn't know. And some of you may be shocked to hear this. And I said, you and I need to work together. I said, I used to work in the Obama White House. You've got all these governors doing all this stuff. We need to work together. And we shocked a lot of people. Because it turns out when you have this many people behind bars, and this impacts the campuses, where's all this genius? Where's all this talent? And a lot of black and brown communities is locked up in prison. But when you have this many people behind bars, you offend the core sensibilities and the core values of both political parties. At our best, progressives and Democrats believe in something called justice. We don't like it when big people run over little people. We don't like it when majority groups run over minority groups. We care about justice. At their best, conservatives care about something called liberty, individual rights, individual dignity, limited government. Well, the incarceration industry is running over the concepts of justice and liberty. We have the biggest prison population in the peacetime, the biggest peacetime prison population in the history of the world, ×2 right now. China has 1 billion people, only 1 million people locked up. We have 300 million people with 2 million locked up and 4 more million on probation and parole. 6 million people compared to China's 1 million in a country a third the size. You got to go back to Nazi Germany to find numbers of people this big locked up. And we call ourselves the land of the free. And it's hitting poor people and people of color disproportionately. Nobody has ever challenged me on my point about what the kids do on these Ivy League campuses versus housing projects, because they know I'm right. And so you've got to learn how to work across ideological lines, racial lines, to get something done. How are you going to learn it if the campus doesn't include people? You're sending people out to solve problems, and we've got big problems in terms of the ecology, big problems in terms of technology, in terms of demographics, geopolitics. You got more problems to solve in the new century than you've ever had, and yet we're continuing this pattern of sitting people out who can't work in problem-solving teams because they don't know how to talk to somebody who looks different, and they think everybody's supposed to be like them. It doesn't work. And so that's why we were able to get President Trump, who I disagree with on, I always say about President Trump, with Trump I got 99 problems, but prisons ain't one. Okay, that's what I got to say about Trump. We were able to get something done, and frankly, he's gotten too little credit for that. He stood up and he said, "Look, I'm hearing the voices of Southern red state governors saying this is important to do. It can be done safely and smartly. There'll be mistakes, there'll be setbacks, there'll be problems. Nothing's perfect, but I'm willing to get this across the finish line." And I went to the Oval Office. I stood in the Oval Office next to Donald Trump when he signed the bill. He handed me the pen, and a lot of people were shocked. And I said, "Guys, look, we got a lot of battleground issues that we have to fight on. The way we're treating the immigrant community, kids in cages at the border, we can go through the whole list. Burning the planet down for money, we can go through the whole list. There's not a single one of these problems we're going to be able to solve at scale, sustainably, with only one party or one race in the fight. Doesn't work that way. Does not work that way." And so, I'll close with this. I have so much. I've been looking forward to getting here. They said, "You got 20 minutes." 20 minutes? My intro was 5. So, anyway, but let me just tell you, Just one last story. For me, watching what was going on in Appalachia and some of these other red states and red counties with this opioid epidemic, and people dropping dead by the thousands, was hard because you hate those funerals. And at the same time, when we had an addiction crisis with crack cocaine in the black community, there was no sympathy. Industrial parts of this country where you had a lot of black folks, whether you're talking about Los Angeles, where it just deindustrialized overnight, and people turned to drugs. They sent in SWAT teams. They built prisons. Now you're deindustrializing other parts of America where it's hitting more white folks, and they're at least trying to send in help. And that challenged me. How do I deal with that? I want help for people, but I want help for all people. I want empathy for people, but I want empathy for all people. Do I say it's wrong to be empathetic for these, or do I try to figure out a way to generate more empathy all around? So I spent some time in Appalachia, spent some time in West Virginia, and I realized something. For all the talk and all the bills being passed, help is not getting there anyway. People are still dropping dead. I saw small towns in West Virginia where they would have to rent freezer trucks on Friday nights because so many people would overdose over the weekend that the morgue would be full and they would need freezer trucks to house the bodies till Monday morning. This despite all the talk of empathy and help and all the bills and all the speeches. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go back to South Central Los Angeles. Frontline communities who for 30 years have been dealing with an addiction epidemic and no real help, and have genius at it, have developed programs and housing strategies and sermons and all of this great genius to deal with this crisis. And I'm going to tell what I saw. And I'm going to say, listen, those folks in Appalachia, mostly white, mostly Republican, mostly conservatives, are literally going to funeral after funeral. They don't have enough sense to call you and say, how do you deal with this? And we don't have enough heart to call them and offer. And so let's end the nonsense. Common pain should lead to common purpose. And common purpose should lead to common projects. And common projects might restore some common sense, at least bottom up, if not top down. And so we've established an exchange where we've flown leaders from from South Central to West Virginia, front lines, to share information and help each other. And we've flown leaders from West Virginia to South Central to see what's going on. And I tell you what, if you want to see a rural red state Trump voter have their minds blown, drop them in South Central, where, despite all the challenges, black women mostly, and let's be honest, have figured out how to write the grants, how to run the community development agencies, how to build the transitional housing programs, how to train all those people coming home, how to help and hold all those people, and how to go against the odds every single day and create miracles every single day. That witnessing, these guys literally said, we don't know how you're doing this. We don't even have one recovery bed in our whole county. We don't know how you're doing this. Will you please help us? Unless you think it's one-sided. We also went up to Washington, D.C., and we met with Kellyanne Conway in the Trump White House, and we met with Kamala Harris and others on the Democratic side. And to see those red state Trump voters get in the face of Republicans and say, what are you guys doing for the people in the inner cities? What are you guys doing? It's wrong, these people need help. And then to watch these black grandmamas get in the face of these these lawmakers and say, what are you doing to help these people? And to watch them walk down the hallway, literally arm in arm. That's what we should be trying to prepare these students to do. That's going to be the key. Doesn't mean they agree on everything. Doesn't mean they don't fuss and fight in the bus about everything under the sun. But we're developing a capacity for people to at least work across difference, to recognize the battleground and deal with that effectively, but never lose sight of the common ground and be able to deal with that effectively too. And if this university community is going to be able to have the impact it needs to have, central to the mission has to be this idea of diversity and equity and inclusion, not as a favor to anybody. It's a superpower. It's a superpower. You're giving people, you're equipping people to go out there and make a tremendous difference in the economy, to make a lot of money for themselves as your alumni, but also to make a tremendous difference in our politics by being able to work together and, surprise, surprise, win a country that has liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Our college counselor came up to us and told us about this program, and I heard free scholarship to U of M. I was like, that sounds pretty great.
Tienes que agarrar cualquier oportunidad que te llegue, y esta fue una de las que nos interesó porque nos prometía llegar hasta el sueño que ahora está cumpliendo.
I saw that as a good chance to, start something new, set me on a good path.
What families in the communities don't always know is that just graduating high school is not sufficient enough to end up at one of these campuses. We're mostly providing them with academic enrichment in the area of mathematics, plus English language arts instruction, and we also engage them in science instruction. In both the summer of the 11th grade and 12th grade, we provide SAT preparation.
Something I really enjoyed that some of the staff we had, like math classes, were by math professors of U of M. So it was pretty impressive to get to meet these super smart people.
My sense is the University of Michigan has a commitment to the students that we serve here who are working really hard to be successful.
Y les doy gracias que existan estos programas y que nos ayuden a nosotros como comunidad y no con muchos recursos.
And by our senior year, we had a lot of graduating seniors going on to University of Michigan with great opportunities. So it turned out really well for me and everybody else.
It was just amazing to see how much he has grown. It was just a proud moment.
I had the benefit of a Saturday program that was critical, not only me going to college, but in the college I ended up going to. And it warms my heart to know that I can help another generation of young people.
And I can say, since he's been in this program, he's been a mentor to his brothers.
Getting my acceptance letter to U of M and Georgetown, I cried when I got it, but I was just so happy.
Well, I like to say that we just had an unexpected benefit listening to Van talk. The students in the room, you all thought you were at Michigan to learn philosophy, English, science, and math. And what you just discovered is that this is such a great value because you're also being trained to be superheroes. So I really appreciate Van emphasizing the value of DEI work in preparing all of us to go out into this very complex world and work together on some of the world's very complex problems. And as Van indicated, this work requires certain competency. Fundamental competency is being able to work across lines of difference. And so I'd like to start off our conversation by having each panelist say a couple of words about the work that they're doing here at the University of Michigan to equip our students to be the superheroes that they're going to be when they go out into the world. So Ethan, we'll start with you.
Sure, so thank you so much. I'm one of the DEI leads, right, that have been mentioned before, and specifically I'm at Rackham Graduate School, and very excited to have an unbelievably talented, committed team to be able to work with that's diverse and committed to diversity as a core value of Rackham, but also as an institution. And I think one of the fundamental things that we do at Rackham Graduate School is train PhD students. And so one of the issues, that's brought up often within institutions and their challenges for achieving their diversity and inclusion goals is lack of faculty diversity. And so we're training the future diverse faculty of this country and of this world because of the tremendous contributions of our international PhD students as well. And so, I feel really blessed and honored just to be part of that educational formation of these future teams and these future faculty that are going to, progress social justice in ways that we can't even imagine yet.
Good. Thank you. Ashley.
Thank you. I'm Ashley Lucas, and I'm a faculty member in the Department of Theater and Drama, as well as in the Residential College. And for the last 6 years, I've served as the director of the Prison Creative Arts Project, which is a program on our campus. Thank you. The Prison Creative Arts Project, or PCAP for short, trains literally 200 volunteers from the community and students from this university, both graduate and undergraduate, to enter carceral facilities in the state of Michigan and provide arts programming. We've also made a commitment to diversity in ways that I haven't seen on this campus before. So Prison Creative Arts Project classes are often co-taught with a formerly incarcerated person who comes onto our staff for the period that they teach with us. And alongside the Carceral State Project, which is a group of faculty, graduate students, and postdocs and undergrads who come together to seriously think about issues of mass incarceration in the state of Michigan and globally. We are trying to change some of the admission policies that have discouraged people with criminal records from applying to the University of Michigan. We're trying to roll back some of the things like background checks on people with criminal records on our campus to make this a more hospitable environment for people of all backgrounds, particularly those whose lives have been touched by the criminal justice system.
Dim?
My name is Dim Mong, and I'm a senior studying political science and history here.
And my involvement with DEI is mainly through the United Asian American Organizations, which is an umbrella org of about 20 Asian Pacific Islander American groups on campus, as well as the Climate Action Movement, which is a coalition of environmental justice organizers. So some of our work include the climate strikes, climate sit-ins, kind of pushing the university to achieve true carbon neutrality by 2030. And then UAO does Asian Pacific Islander American Heritage Month, trying to improve like campus culture so that it's more equitable. And in terms of competency, I think something to keep in mind, especially from a student perspective, is how much of a burden a lot of this work is for us, for people of color. I'm a first-generation college student here, first-generation immigrant as well, and I think that a lot of my peers, especially from organizations like the Arab Student Association, La Casa, Black Student Union, Native American Student Association, is that along with our schoolwork, along with our personal relationships with our families and friends, continuously coming in and day out, putting in this work, trying to be representatives of our communities is a toll, and it's taxing and it's draining. But we're here because we profess to be the leaders and the best, but I think that we have to keep in mind the emotional drainage it takes to be leaders.
That's an excellent point. Van, I'd like to pick up on Dim's point here with a question for you that might help us a bit on this. As Dim is pointing out, it's often the people who are not as well represented at an institution that get called upon to carry the burden of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as Dim points out, it's taxing because you're here to be a student, but you have these real commitments and you want to pursue those as well. You've shared with us some of the burden that you've had to endure working with people like Gingrich So can you say a little bit about how you sustain yourself given the burden of doing the kind of work that you and our students are doing here on this campus around DEI?
No pressure, no diamonds. No pressure, no diamonds. It's fundamentally unfair. It's also fundamentally necessary. And so I say two different things that don't seem like they go together, but the truth is messy. If you are not in I'll just call it a one down category, whatever it is, if you're on gender, race, whatever, if you're not in that category, if you're one up, you tend to have blind spots. When you're one down, you tend to have sore spots. And this makes the relationship very difficult. I'll use an example. Everyone in here probably has a certain privilege. You're neurotypical. What? No, you all have neurotypical privilege. What you talking about? If you ever have someone in your life who has autism, who's on the spectrum, you realize what a burden they carry. You have to spend time with that child and tell them very, very basic things. Look, when you're dealing with neurotypicals, you have to deal with them a certain way. First of all, when a neurotypical enters a room with another neurotypical, they walk toward each other. Nobody knows why. That's what they do. That's how they are. You gotta understand them. And if you don't do that, they're gonna think something's wrong. Number two, if a neurotypical is talking to another neurotypical, and the one that's talking has a sad face, the other neurotypical will also have a sad face, even if they're not sad. No one knows why, but this is how they are. And you gotta understand that. You won't be able to deal. Also, neurotypicals, when they see each other, they start talking. No one knows why. But you have to talk back. However, neurotypicals are very strange people. You can talk about anything in the world except death and things that happen in the restroom. For some reason, they don't like that. Nobody knows why, but you have to be able to deal with these people. Why? You're one down. When you're one down in dynamic, you have to study it. Now, you didn't even know you were a neurotypical until I told you you were. When you're one up, you have blind spots that are so total, you don't even know. You say, well, why do we have to talk? Let's just all be individuals. My God, why do we have to raise all this stuff? Van, you're trying to play the neurotypical card on me. Like, no, you're ignorant because you're one up. I'm trying to help you get smarter and deal with your blind spot so you can be smart, so you can do better. Listen, you didn't know, you just learned something about yourself by hearing from the perspective of people who deal with the autistic community. You're smarter now, you're better now, you haven't been oppressed, you're better. But then the person who's in that one down category, my God, the sore spots, the pain, having to always be the one trying to do the education, having always be the one to get hurt, and then have to deal with the hurt with grace and class and eloquence, actually helping the other person get smarter while you're getting more injured. So we need to approach each other. If you find yourself saying, why are we even talking about this? Maybe you got a blind spot. When you're taking on the pain, that's a real sore spot. The only thing I can say to you is, it's unfair, and it's necessary. And the weird thing about it is, as tragic as that is to say, as hurtful as it is for me to say it to you as a young person, by you doing the extra, it's just like if you go to the gym, we're going to treat you unfairly. You have to pick up the 200 pounds. I'm going to pick up the 100 pounds. Well, that's unfair to you today. But you're going to be stronger tomorrow, and it's worth it.
So I think this raises another issue here. Earlier, we were backstage talking with Rob and Sellers, and one of the things that Rob has emphasized is that DEI is about institutional culture change. Now, another great thing about the University of Michigan is that it's a university that also has collaboration as part of its institutional DNA. And I think another thing we're seeing this morning is that DEI is ultimately about collaboration. Now, one way maybe to bear some of the burden, to bear some of the pain, is if the institution empowers us to work collaboratively around DEI issues. So maybe we can have each of you say something about your experience of collaboration here and shed some light on the extent to which it's maybe helped you do your work more effectively and also perhaps ease some of the burden that Dim has brought to our attention.
Yeah, of course, and if I can just add to that, talking about the scholarship of the invisible tax, it's often about faculty, right, and how the invisible tax becomes an obstacle to gaining tenure. But there's obviously a tax to everyone that does this work. And so I like to reframe it when talking to our students and my colleagues as a real opportunity, especially for our students, right? We've all talked about these diversity competencies as being something that's going to be extremely valuable, right? You're preparing yourself for a future profession, and you're actually positioned better to be more successful because you demonstrate these competencies. And so I would take full advantage, right? It doesn't mean that it's not tiring, it doesn't mean that it's not burdensome, but in the end, you will be stronger. We're stronger because of our collaboration. And so in addition to having so many dedicated students and colleagues, we also have faculty and researchers, right, like Scott Page, who talks about the diversity bonus. And so with the diversity bonus, it's not just having a diverse group, a diverse collective. It's making sure that everyone on that group feels completely empowered, completely included, so that they can share, right, all of their talents to solve complicated problems. And that's when you really maximize the diversity bonus. And so that's how I feel like we are able to work at Rackham and other areas of the University of Michigan as well. And so, you know, I've had a real wonderful experience making sure that students are at the table, graduate students are at the table, different teammates throughout the institution, throughout Rackham, working with faculty, and also working with alumni, because we have alumni that are tremendously dedicated to these issues as well, right, and want to support even after they've left. And so, but it takes a lot of work. So not just creating diverse teams, but making sure that everyone feels like they belong on that team, everyone has an equal voice on that team, everybody contributes, everybody feels that they're included. That takes a lot of work and intentionality.
Can I say something about that? I mean, everywhere I go where things are winning, this is the core competency people are starting to hire for. I cannot stress this enough. Something has happened in the past 3 or 4 years globally, where these teams are breaking down. You know, you're opening up something in a different country, or you're trying to penetrate a different market. And what's happening is that people who were very successful under the old model are, I mean, I'm talking about straight white dudes often, are failing now as managers. They're getting sued, but that's just the type, they're also just failing to meet their numbers. And it's turning out that people from those categories who have had more diverse experiences, they have learned how to learn about difference. They've learned how to learn. Because when you're learning about difference, there's an emotional part as well as intellectual. Somebody challenges you, hey, I think what you said is bigoted. What happens to you physiologically? Do you shut down? Do you go into fight or flight? If you do, you stop becoming a problem solver and you start becoming a part of the problem. Doesn't mean that that person's right or wrong. I'm not talking about whether they're right. I'm saying, have you learned how to learn about difference? Those people who learn that, because they've been in diverse campuses, they've been in these coalitions or whatever, it sucks. I've got more PTSD from being in coalitions than you have for being in faculty meetings. So I'm not saying that it's easy, but I'm passionate when I go on these campuses. You are not doing favors for the brown kids or whatever. You are giving the entire student body an opportunity to be successful. I just can't say it enough. And also, let me just say one more thing. In this one down, one up dynamic, the minute you realize, first of all, we're all one up on something. I'm one up on being a male, I'm one up on being heterosexual, I'm one up on being, got a fancy law degree from Yale, I got a TV show that nobody watches, but I'm one up. I'm one down on being black. So I can actually, if I'm smart, and everybody's one down on something. Even if you're a straight, white, rich man, at one point at least you were young, and nobody cares about young people. So you know what it's like as a young person to try to be heard and try to explain and not be taken seriously. Everybody's been one down and everybody's been one up. And so you have this ability to work the empathy and to understand intellectually and emotionally how to be a learner in this. And if you do that, you are going to absolutely kill it. And if you can't, the market's going to spit you out. That's just where we are.
So Ashley, please, you haven't had a chance to weigh in on this. And then I'm afraid we're going to be out of time. I'm getting cued that we need to wrap up. Yeah.
Well, I'll just quickly say that our collaborations at the Prison Creative Arts Project have taught us that some of the greatest learning we do comes from incarcerated people, that I may be the professor in a given structural institution, but my students are learning more by spending time with people who are serving time than they are by sitting in my classroom reading books and learning anything that I could tell them. They're also learning more from my formerly incarcerated co-instructors and the formerly incarcerated classmates that my students have who come into our room than I could do by myself. So part of collaboration is the humility to realize that you can never be the expert about everything, and that often people who are not located in centers of institutional power have an incredible amount to teach us, and that we ought to be smart enough to listen.
Wow. Thank you. So please give us the last word here.
I think collaboration is interesting because I've seen it work really well in certain organizations, and then I've seen it work really poorly. With the United Asian American Organizations, our collaborations with Multi-Ethnic Student Affairs has been really great. Our advisor, Chia Yang, shout out to her. She's awesome. She's always been there, whether we need like student support or just personal support. And then people like Dr. Marie Ting from the National Center for Institutional Diversity, Dr. Mary Rose. These APIA women faculty have been there for us in this org, but then I've seen collaboration work very poorly with the climate action movement and the university institution. I think that there's a lot of pushback for young people with climate work on this campus, whether it's carbon neutrality, divestment from fossil fuels. I think that our voices are sought out when it's convenient, but then shut out when we speak up too loudly. I think our collaborations, like we seek those collaborations, so we seek to have these dialogues with the administration and to actually achieve, you know, a joint goal, which is to make the university better and more equitable.
Well, that's a really important point.
I know you're going to throw us out, but I'm going to say this.
Go ahead.
I got to say this.
Please.
On TV, they go to commercials. I can't, but this, I can push it just 2 minutes just to say.
Go ahead.
There will be no successful solution for the ecology crisis. There'll be no successful solution for the climate crisis if communities of color and directly impacted people, the people who have been hit first and worst by all of these issues, aren't put front and center and given the opportunity to articulate the agenda. I worked for President Obama on this 10 years ago, and it was very clear then that you cannot hurt the planet without first hurting people. And the people that you hurt are those frontline indigenous communities, African American, Latino communities, even those that are middle class still are overly burdened when it comes to pollution and poison and toxins. And so we are the people who are bearing the weight. We get hit first and worst for all of it. We should not benefit last and least for the positive changes that are coming. That has got to be a principle. And the reason that we lost 10 years, because we had a Green New Deal in the Obama administration 10 years ago. I was the person who was the architect of it. I had an $80 billion budget. We had a real shot at passing. And why did we lose? We lost because the polluters were able to create a backlash alliance and drive a wedge and tell people with very, very good evidence, these environmentalists care more about polar bears than they care about your kids. These environmentalists are more concerned about factory farms and what's going on in prisons. These environmentalists are not your friend. They just want hybrid cars for themselves and solar panels for their own homes. They don't give a damn about you. Why are you with them? And it split apart that coalition. And had there been a real commitment from the environmental community to say, no, we want to green the ghetto first. We want to take all those kids standing on street corners who don't have jobs. We want them to be first in line to put up those solar panels. We want them to be first in line to create the organic garden. We want to empower this young generation to green the whole world. We want to take the people who most need work and give them the work that most needs to be done.
Right.
Had that happened, we'd have fixed this thing 10 years ago. These young people are right. They need to be listened to and respected. Thank you very much.
Well, that's a wonderful note to end on. This is the University of Michigan, so make sure you don't leave here today empty. Make sure you leave here and digest the knowledge that has been shared with us by this great panel, and to think about how it can help you act in your life to help transform our campus, our university, and ultimately our world. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So please again join me in thanking our keynote speaker, Van Jones, our panelists from U of M, and our moderator, Professor Derek Darby. My name is Kristen Bolster, and I'm a member of the Comprehensive Studies program as a mentor and as an ambassador. I've also served on the Student Advisory Planning Group that helped plan today's summit, so it really means a lot to me to see everyone here and an active participant in this year's plan. It is my pleasure to introduce our student performance featuring original choreography. The piece, entitled Love is Love, explores what it means to be queer in a heteronormative dominated world and the ways in which one can find joy and happiness living authentically as themselves. This piece is an excerpt from the World Building Showcase in November, and more information about that showcase can be found at the front doors. Please welcome Love is Love.
We're gonna prove that in this day and age being gay isn't a crime. This is our moment to change the world. One lesbian.
Doesn't matter if you love him or capital H-I-M. Just put your paws up, 'cause you were born this way, baby.
Note to self, don't be gay in Indiana. Big heads up, that's a really stupid plan. There are places where it's in to be out, maybe San Francisco or thereabout. But in Indiana, without a doubt, if you're not straight, then guess what's bound to hit the fan? Just breathe, Emma, just breathe. I didn't want you around. Those pretty faces always make you stand out in a crowd. But someone picked you from the bunch. One glance was all it took. Now it's much too late for me to take a second look. Oh, baby, give me one more chance. Won't you please let me back in your heart? Oh, darling, I was glad to let you go. Let you go, baby. But now since I see you in his arms,
I don't know who I am. I've become someone new. Nothing I just did is anything I would do. I'm dizzy, I'm nauseous, I'm shaky. I'm scared. Am I falling into nothingness or flying into something so sublime? I don't know.
I see both sides, let you know. I don't know.
And I can't change. Even if I tried, even if I wanted to. And I can't change. Even if I tried, even if I wanted to. My love, my love, my love, she keeps me warm. She keeps me warm. She keeps me warm. She keeps me warm. Love is patient. Love is kind. I'm not crying on Sunday. Love is patient. Love is kind.
One more time for Arts in Color. Again, just in case you were confused, I'm Rob Sellers, not Van Jones. This has been a wonderful, wonderful morning. As we used to say in church, I feel quite full. I want to thank our outstanding guest, Van Jones, as well as the panelists, and our wonderful student performers. Before we leave, though, I think it's also important for us to thank all of these wonderful people who have made this morning and, quite frankly, this month possible. In particular, I want to thank the Diversity Working Group, the Student Advisory Planning Group, the DEI Leads, and I would also like to personally thank the DEI Summit Implementation Group, those folks who are on Katrina's staff, Mike Moreland, Emma Holmes, and Lauren Love, as well as the entire ODAY staff. And if you all are here, would you please stand and get a well-deserved round of applause. And last but not least, I very personally would like to thank our Deputy Chief Diversity Officer, Katrina Wade Golden, who is, as Mark had mentioned, the engine behind what you saw this morning and what you'll see the rest of this month, as well as the DEI implementation process. So as we prepare to leave, I hope that you too have been inspired, that you'll go out, work even harder to make the University of Michigan the place that it can be, the place we want it to be, and quite frankly, the place it needs to be if we are going to continue to be the leaders and the best. That means more diverse, more equitable, and more inclusive. Thank you all for joining us this morning.